My name is Anila Omar Lien. I am the President Chief Executive Officer here at the Center for Newcomers in Calgary, and it's my honor to be here with you today. I have a Blackfoot name that was gifted to me, and it was gifted to me by Elder Casey Eaglespeaker from the Ghana Reserve. And the name, and Elder Ruth, I apologize, I practiced so hard to get the right pronunciation, but I never get it right spot on. My Blackfoot name is Misteaki Natusiaki, and it means mountain sun woman. And the knowledge that I've been given by my elder, Casey, is that when there is a request made from the community that somebody outside of the Indigenous community be gifted an Indigenous name, that elder will pray, and they will go through ceremony, and they will pray at least 3 different times to be able to get that name. And so Casey prayed, and he did ceremony, and the name that kept coming back was Misteaki, which means mountain woman. And my sister, and my spiritual sister, my Indigenous sister, a relationship that we chose to create, her name, and she's from the Piikani Reserve, and her name is Natusiaki, which means sun woman. So she went to Elder Casey and said, in order to keep us and for everyone to know that we are family and that she is my little sister, could she be added to her name? Could Natusiaki be added to the name? And so that is how my name is Misteaki Natusiaki, mountain sun woman. Mountain woman is my name, sun woman is her name, and to signify that I am her little sister in this journey, I am now mountain sun woman. So the video you saw really outlined what it is that we've been trying to accomplish for the last many years in Calgary, with even, elders before me that have been trying to bring newcomer communities and Indigenous communities together in terms of what does truth and reconciliation look like in terms of this journey. And we chose to call it Indigenous Education for Newcomers because we really wanted to be able to spotlight to all new people to Canada what it really means to live the Indigenous experience, what it means for our Indigenous brothers and sisters to have us on their land. And so since 2017, since we created this programming, we were blessed to be able to have an elders council with elders that were within gender parity, with elders from each of the reserves in Treaty 7. And I know that Annalie had mentioned each of them and who they are and which reserves they are. And the really neat thing about this was we did this for about a year in the Elders Council. And then the elders said to us, wait a second, isn't this about bringing Indigenous people and newcomer people together? Where are the newcomer elders? Where are the global elders? Why aren't they here? And so we were able to then recruit people that were known in their own ethnocultural communities as elders and as leaders, and we were able to create what we believe is the first of its kind Elders Council that has Indigenous elders and what we refer to as global elders that together shape the work that we're able to do. We have an advisory committee of people that work in social services that are from immigrant serving agencies like ours and also from Indigenous communities as well. We were able to do all of this through a sacred pipe ceremony. This was really important to us to be able to, as our Indigenous brothers and sisters say, to set the tone and to be able to start in a good way. We wanted to ensure that we were doing everything within the mindset of the Creator, within a good way of moving forward together. And so everything was done in ceremony, everything was held sacred, and everything is oral, right? Everything is done by our word and by our actions towards each other and how we speak to each other. Through this, we were able to create a toolkit. That toolkit is in its final versions. It was all funded through Immigration, Refugee, Citizenship Canada, through the federal government, through IRCC, and we will be able to actually disseminate that through all agencies or anyone who would like it throughout Treaty 7 because it is specifically relevant to this region. We have some parts that are missing that we'd like to continue to add on, but that's really the gist of what we do. And, we had a lot of successes, and most of the speeches that I make or the speeches that any of my colleagues make, around Indigenous education for newcomers, they really speak to all of these successes, some of the awards, accolades, all of the wonderful things that we've actually been able to accomplish. We do a lot of presentations like this, and we speak to this a lot. But for this conference and for this opening, I wanted to really speak to the thing that no one ever speaks about when we talk about truth and reconciliation. And that's the real journey that happened behind the scenes. That's the real journey that doesn't get into the sound clips, that doesn't get into the photos, that doesn't get into those videos, that isn't in the toolkit, right? It's the hardship, the struggle, the trauma, all of that journey that it took to get here, and how we're continuing on through that in resiliency and finding new ways of communicating and being together as we work through our own individual traumas, our own individual lives, and then our collective stories. And what does that mean in the context of this country in Canada that's been colonized? We classify newcomers here in Canada, of course, in many different ways. There are some that chose to come here, like my parents. My family started arriving in 1963 and they chose to come here from India. And we call those people immigrants, right? That they chose to come here. Some came to study and work and then stayed, like my husband, right, from the Caribbean. He came to study, decided to start working, and then stayed and became a Canadian citizen. And then, of course, what we're here for today, those people that really had no choice. People that came here as refugees because they've been displaced by war. They've been displaced by all kinds of different things, climate, famine, whatever else, my cousins. And then there's me. That's the other part we never talk about, right? We talk a lot about Canadian identity. We talk about the unity of being Canadian. We talk about pluralism. We talk about how we are the best example of multiculturalism in our country, in the world, right? And we are. We absolutely are. And there is some meat to that. And there is some nuance to that, a lot of nuance to that. There is a lot of struggle to that. So for many of us, like myself, people of color, Canadians that are born here, racialized Canadians, for me, definitely, my heart is with the refugees because I understand that the most clearly in terms of who I am. Because I am that, just a little bit. Even though I was born here, I've always known myself to be a displaced person. And that's because even though we have democracy, even though we have all of these wonderful gifts of pluralism and we're working through all of these things, we're still steeped in colonialism. We're still steeped in racism. We're still steeped in Islamophobia. I'm a Muslim woman. It makes it extremely difficult for me to not feel displaced. Can Canada really be mine if all of this is still happening? My motherland, right, where my family is from, in India, I've been there maybe 20 times, and I'm 45 years old. So I've been there a lot. I speak Urdu fluently. I'm pretty proficient in Hindi. But I know it's not home. India isn't my home. And this is markedly different than my Canadian friends that I grew up with, that I still are my best friends, that have a different skin color than me, that are white-skinned, right? They tell me I don't feel displaced. This is my home, right? They think I don't need to go back to England or to Ireland or to wherever they're from, right? This is where I'm from. And for me, I feel like most of the time I feel Canadian, but when I really think about it, I feel very displaced. Like I don't have a place that I could go back to, that I could call my home. And a lot of this is really because regardless of immigration status, Canada is a very new country. We've only been around for a little over 150 years. And in that, we still know, we are still very clear on the fact that we are on somebody else's land, that we came here, and because we are here, and our generations of people that were here, as you heard it this morning from our wonderful elder and from our knowledge keeper, and from Annalie talking about, our land acknowledgement. The mere fact that we are here is because a mass and systemic genocide occurred. That is why we're all sitting here today, right? And the historical and intergenerational trauma is palpable. So we talk about how we are welcoming refugees and how we're talking about refugee health. But we've also have an immense amount of trauma here in this country with our Indigenous community. And we are all responsible. We are all a part of that as well. So it gets very sticky. It gets very tricky. And it's really, really hard, right? Through this journey of truth and reconciliation and the Indigenous Education for Newcomers programming, we talk a lot about our successes, but we hardly ever talk about this real hardship. It's not perfect. It's messy. It's ugly. Sometimes it's downright scary. And mostly it's heart-wrenching. It takes a lot of work to really get to know another community, to really put yourself in their position, to really put aside even the traumas and the way that you're feeling, to put aside, I can say it for myself, to put aside my own ego, to put aside my own person, my own being, and to really try to understand another person. And when you bring together two different groups, newcomers and Indigenous people, a lot happens. First, these respective groups, we're not homogenous, right? When I say newcomers, or I say the global community or ethnocultural people, we're very different. Even if I talk about my own home community of India, yet everyone will say it's just one homogenous group, Indian people, right? And it's similar with our Indigenous communities, and it's similar. And while we celebrate all of the pieces that bring us together, our elders, our global elders, our Indigenous elders, they focus us on how we can celebrate together, how we can talk about our humanity, how we can talk about all of the pieces that bring us together, that make us stronger together. And there's so much joy in this, and there's so much peace in this. We often don't say we share common ground in trauma, genocide, unmarked graves of children, war, disease, destruction of homeland, colonialism. This brings us together as well, but also causes much conflict. When two highly traumatized groups come together, unfortunately, there's a chance for lateral violence. There's a chance that I'm going to lash out at my sister. There's a chance that she is going to lash out at me, because we are human, because this is messy, because nobody's ever done it before. This is the first time that we're actually trying to do it, right? And it's emotional, and both groups have stereotypes that are ingrained, right? They come from the predominant culture, right? We hear when our global elders and our Indigenous elders talk, our Indigenous elders said to us, we want the global elders here because we have to work with our own community. They're saying things like, refugees are taking our jobs. They're saying things like, refugees are getting much more than our veterans are, right? And then our global elders are saying, yes, we need to do a lot more work with our immigrant communities, with our newcomer communities, because they're saying all Indigenous people are drunk, right? They're saying all Indigenous people have, whatever other stereotypes. And so we need to, so there's a lot of work that we're doing, and there's a lot of unlearning that needs to happen as well within these groups. And who are the people doing the work? It's us, the BIPOC community, Black, Indigenous, people of color, right? And when you're a leader within those communities, right? I was talking to a good friend of mine from the O'Brien Institute just recently, saying that we have to be perfect because we're always on the spotlight, because we're always the ones that we can't make a mistake. We can't have a bad day. We can't not know cultural competency. We can't not know how to say the right thing all the time. And it's exhausting. We're held to higher standards because of colonialism and because of racism. And we're always told, suck it up, keep moving. Because if you don't do the work, who's going to do the work, right? And it takes a toll on us. The journey of truth and reconciliation is a difficult one. It's not just land acknowledgements and regalia and everyone getting along. Those are some really great parts about it, 100%, and make it worth doing it for sure. But it's difficult. It takes years. It takes patience, relationship building, and a lot of I'm sorry, and a lot more of thank you for being here on this journey with me, for helping me, for teaching me, for showing me the way that you want to be respected, the way that you want to be acknowledged. And with the increase of immigration in Canada year over year, and the intergenerational trauma of our Indigenous people ever present, now is the time that we all need to be courageous and have these nuanced and difficult conversations. We can do the land acknowledgements 100%. We can wear the beautiful earrings 100%. We can go to the powwows and we can have these wonderful conversations around what brings us together. But the nuanced conversations, the conversations on trauma, the conversations on lateral violence, those also need to happen so that we can move forward in a good way. So when I started this talk, I told you about my Indigenous sister from Pekani. I didn't tell you, we worked together on this work for 8 years. We became sisters. We love each other. And it's been a year now since we've been estranged. And it hurt a lot because this work is hard. And we're human. But now, in my head, I imagine one day I will drive out to Pekani, or my own doorbell will ring, and she'll be standing there, and we will reconcile. Why? Because that's what family does. This work is really hard. And what I found is that only love can truly sustain it. Thank you.